The morning started like any other at NORAD, the massive underground military facility buried deep in Colorado's mountains. Commander Hannah Kim was drinking her third cup of coffee, watching dozens of screens that tracked everything flying around Earth. Satellites, airplanes, even space junk. Nothing moved through Earth's airspace without them knowing about it. Then something impossible happened. A massive shape appeared on the screens, already inside Earth's atmosphere. No alarms had sounded. No early warning systems had detected it. The object was simply there as if it had materialized out of thin air. "What the hell is that?" Hannah shouted, nearly spilling her coffee. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up different camera angles and sensor readings. The technicians around her scrambled to their stations. Young Sergeant Lee Dong-woo stared at his screen in disbelief. "Ma'am, it's not showing up on my radar. Our missiles aren't locking onto it. It's like our systems can't even see it properly." Through the satellite feed, they watched the vessel descend toward New York City. It looked nothing like human technology, smooth and organic, like a giant silver teardrop falling from the sky. The ship moved with impossible grace, completely, silent, leaving no trail of fire or smoke. "Get me the president on the line," Hannah ordered, "and contact UN headquarters immediately." But even as she spoke, they could see the ship settling gently onto the plaza in front of the United Nations building. People on the streets stopped and stared, pointing at the sky. Some ran, others pulled out their phones to record. Within minutes, the footage was spreading across social media worldwide. The ship's surface rippled like liquid metal, and an opening appeared. From inside stepped a figure that made everyone watching hold their breath. The alien was tall, almost 8 feet, with grey skin that seemed to shimmer in the sunlight. It had 4 arms, each moving independently, and its eyes were completely black. Not just the pupils, but the entire eye, like looking into deep space. Dr. Park Seo-jin, a linguist who happened to be at the UN for a conference, watched from a window as the alien walked calmly toward the main entrance. Security guards raised their weapons, but something about the alien's presence made them hesitate. It moved with such confidence, such purpose, that it seemed almost rude to stop it. The alien spoke to the first guard it encountered. Somehow, impossibly, it spoke perfect English. "I must address your governing council immediately. This is a matter of planetary importance." Within 30 minutes, emergency sessions were called. World leaders joined by video conference as the alien stood in the Security Council chamber. It introduced itself simply as Tech-9, survivor of a world called Zerathi that no human had ever heard of. "I bring a message," Tech-9 said, its voice carrying no emotion. "The hegemony empire has marked your world for pacification. You have 72. You have your hours to prepare. This is the only warning you will receive." The room erupted. Translators worked frantically as delegates shouted questions in dozens of languages. Secretary General Park Jimin, a veteran diplomat who had handled countless international crises, raised his hand for silence. "Why should we believe you?" he asked carefully. "And why does Earth receive only one messenger? Surely such an important matter deserves proper diplomatic protocol." Tech-9's black eyes seemed to focus on something far beyond the room. Other worlds received fleets of ships and formal ultimatums because they were considered worthy opponents. Your species has been assessed as so technologically primitive that standard conquest protocols are unnecessary. The Empire views you as, how would you say, insects to be stepped on rather than enemies to be fought. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the most powerful people on Earth suddenly felt very small. President Lee Min-ho was having lunch with his advisors when the emergency call came through. His chief of staff burst into the dining room, tablet in hand, face pale as paper. "Sir, you need to see this immediately," she said, setting the device on the table. Lee Min-ho watched the UN footage with growing skepticism. An alien invasion? In 2025? It looked like something out of a Hollywood movie. He pushed his plate away and leaned back in his chair. "This has to be some kind of publicity stunt," he declared. "Maybe the UN is trying to get more funding for their space programs, or it's those movie studios again with their viral marketing." But his confidence cracked when Tech-9 stepped forward in the Security Council chamber. The alien reached into what appeared to be empty air and pulled out a device no bigger than a smartphone. It was perfectly smooth with no buttons or screens, just a surface that seemed to bend light around itself. "You require proof," Tech 9 said simply. The alien walked to the thick concrete wall that separated the main chamber from the hallway. Security. Guards tensed, hands moving toward their weapons, but Tech 9 ignored them completely. It pressed the device against the wall for exactly 3 seconds. The concrete didn't explode or burn. It simply ceased to exist. A perfect circular hole appeared, 3 feet wide, going completely through the wall. Beyond it, they could see the surprised faces of security personnel in the hallway. The edges of the hole were smooth as glass, as if the concrete had been scooped out by a giant spoon. President Lee Min-ho's lunch turned to ash in his mouth as he watched the live broadcast. Around the world, similar reactions played out in government buildings, military bases, and research facilities. Dr. Cho Yoon was in her quantum physics laboratory at Seoul National University when her graduate student burst through the door. "Professor, you have to see this." The young man was practically shaking as he turned on the wall-mounted television. Cho Yoon had spent 30 years studying the fundamental forces of the universe. She understood quantum mechanics, particle physics, and energy conversion better than almost anyone on Earth. As she watched Tech 9's demonstration, her scientific mind raced through possibilities. "That's not possible with our understanding of physics," she whispered. "The energy required to disintegrate matter at that level. It should have caused an explosion, released massive amounts of heat. But look, no flash, no smoke, no radiation signature visible on the emergency sensors." She immediately called her research team. Within an hour, they were analyzing every frame of the footage, running calculations, trying to understand what they had witnessed. But the more they studied it, the more impossible it seemed. General Park Seo was in the Pentagon's Situation Room when the demonstration happened. As South Korea's military liaison to the United States, he had access to the most classified weapon systems on Earth. He knew exactly what humanity's most powerful military forces could accomplish. "Run the numbers," he ordered his staff. How would our best weapons perform against that technology? The results were devastating. Their most advanced fighter jets suddenly seemed like paper airplanes. The latest missile defense systems looked like toys. Even nuclear weapons, humanity's most destructive force, paled in comparison to a handheld device that could erase matter itself. "Sir," his aide said quietly, "if they can do that to concrete, what can they do to our tanks, our ships, our cities?" But while world leaders panicked and military commanders despaired, something unexpected was happening in laboratories and research facilities around the globe. Small groups of brilliant minds were asking different questions. In a basement laboratory in Tokyo, engineer Yamamoto Kenji wasn't trying to build a bigger weapon. Instead, he was studying the energy patterns visible in the broadcast footage, looking for any sign of weakness or limitation. At MIT, a team of computer scientists led by Dr. Jennifer Walsh began analyzing the alien ship's approach, looking for patterns in its flight path that might reveal something about its navigation systems. In a secret facility beneath the Swiss Alps, former military strategist Captain Eric Johansson gathered a small team of unconventional thinkers. Their mission wasn't to match the aliens' firepower. That was clearly impossible. Instead, they began studying every successful resistance movement in human history, looking for strategies that might work against a technologically superior enemy. These scattered groups didn't coordinate with each other. Most didn't even know the others existed. But they all shared one crucial insight. Sometimes the best way to fight overwhelming strength isn't with greater strength, but with different thinking entirely. The 72-hour countdown began at exactly midnight, Greenwich Mean Time. Tech 9 expected what always happened next, either complete surrender or a desperate attempt at unified planetary defense. In his long experience with the hegemony empire, conquered species always responded in predictable ways. But humans were different. In Seoul, businessman Kim Jae-ho ignored all the news reports and went to work as usual. He had quarterly reports to finish, and alien invasions or not, his boss still expected them on time. "If we're all going to die anyway," he told his confused secretary, "at least my paperwork will be up to date." Meanwhile, just across the city, University student Park Min-ji was welding steel plates over the windows of her apartment building's basement. She'd convinced 30 neighbors to pool their money for supplies, turning the underground parking garage into a survival bunker. "My grandfather survived the Korean War by being prepared," she explained to anyone who would listen. In rural Montana, farmer Bill Anderson loaded his truck with supplies and headed for the mountains. He'd been preparing for societal collapse for 20 years, and an alien invasion was just another Tuesday for him. His underground shelter had enough food and ammunition to last 2 years. But in New York City, street artist Carlos Rivera was spray painting a massive mural on the side of a building. The artwork showed humans and aliens shaking hands under a rainbow. "Maybe they're here to help us," he told the gathering crowd. "Maybe this is humanity's chance to join a galactic community." In Silicon Valley, a group of teenage hackers led by Amy Chen had been trying to break into Tech-9's ship systems since the moment it landed. They weren't having much success, but they refused to give up. "Every system has vulnerabilities," Amy insisted, as her fingers flew across multiple keyboards. "We just need to find the right back door." Tech-9 watched all of this through monitoring systems he'd placed around major cities. In his 300 years of conquest experience, he'd never seen anything like it. When the Empire came to Zarathi, his home world, the government immediately called for unity. Military forces coordinated a single massive defense. It was logical, organized, and completely futile, but humans weren't being logical at all. Dr. Yoon Jia worked from a secure facility beneath Seoul, monitoring global communications for the South Korean government. Her job was to track humanity's response to the crisis and provide strategic recommendations. What she found left her speechless. "Look at these communication patterns," she told her team, gesturing at the massive wall of screens showing data streams from around the world. "In the past 24 hours, we've identified over 15,000 separate response groups. Some are building bunkers, others are trying to make contact. Religious groups are calling it everything from the apocalypse to the second coming." Her assistant, Lieutenant Park Dong-woo, shook his head in amazement. "Ma'am, there's a group in Australia that's convinced the aliens are here for our coffee. They're organizing a welcoming committee with free samples from every coffee shop in Sydney. And look at this," added Dr. Song Hye-jin, pointing to another screen. "A group of engineers in Germany are trying to reverse engineer the aliens' technology, using nothing but the footage from the UN demonstration. They've already built 3 different theoretical models, but perhaps most puzzling to everyone, including Tech-9, were the humans who seemed completely unaffected by the crisis. In Tokyo, salary workers still crowded the morning trains. In London, people queued politely for buses as if nothing had changed. In Mumbai, street vendors continued selling their food as usual. It's like they're in denial," observed Dr. Yoon Jia. "Or maybe they've just accepted that there's nothing they can do, so they might as well live normally." Tech-9 found this particularly disturbing. Every other species had shown either fear or defiance. Humans showed both, plus indifference, curiosity, hope, despair, and dozens of other reactions simultaneously. He began filing reports to the Empire fleet, still days away from arrival. But how could he explain that the target species wasn't responding as a unified civilization? How could he describe a species that seemed to have 10,000 different opinions about everything, including their own potential extinction? In his private quarters aboard his ship, Tech-9 accessed the Empire's vast database of conquered worlds. He searched for any species that had shown similar behavior patterns. After hours of research, he found nothing comparable. For the first time in his long career, Tech-9 began to wonder if the Empire had made an error in their assessment. These humans weren't behaving like a primitive species at all. They were behaving like something entirely new, something unpredictable, something dangerous. Captain Kim Hyun-woo received his orders at 600 hours, fortify Seoul's military installations, and prepare for conventional warfare. He read the directive twice, then quietly deleted it from his computer. "Sir?" asked Sergeant Lee Min-ho, looking confused as Kim Hyun-woo began packing civilian clothes instead of military gear. "Aren't we supposed to be setting up artillery positions?" Kim Hyun-woo had spent 15 years in special forces, including 2 tours in urban combat zones. He'd learned that when facing overwhelming firepower, the worst strategy was to fight the enemy on their terms. "We're not building bunkers, Sergeant. We're going underground, literally." Within hours, Kim Hyun-woo had gathered a team of urban warfare specialists and begun recruiting civilians with specific skills. Not soldiers, plumbers who knew the city's tunnel systems, electricians who understood power grids, subway workers who could navigate underground networks, and construction workers who knew how to make things collapse safely. In an abandoned warehouse in Seoul's industrial district, they set up training sessions that looked nothing like military exercises. Kim Hyun-woo taught a group of college students how to disable security cameras without being detected. A retired demolitions expert showed office workers how to create controlled power outages using household materials. "The aliens expect us to meet them head-on with tanks and missiles," Kim Hyun-woo explained to his growing group of volunteers. "Instead, we're going to make their occupation as uncomfortable as possible. Think of it as being the world's most annoying houseguests." Meanwhile, in a cramped apartment in Busan, 17-year-old Shin Yoo-jin was proving that age meant nothing when it came to digital warfare. While government hackers struggled to even detect Tech-9's ship on their systems, Yoo-jin had found a way in through what she called the back door nobody thinks to lock. "It's not their weapons systems," she explained to her online team through encrypted chat. "Those are locked down tight, but their basic ship functions, navigation, life support, communication protocols, they're protected like someone's home." Wi-Fi password. Yoo-jin wasn't trying to steal alien superweapons. Instead, she was mapping how the Empire's ships talked to each other, how they navigated space, and how their crews communicated. Information that seemed boring but could prove invaluable. "Look at this," she typed to her international network of young hackers. "Their ships can't function without constant communication with each other. It's like they've never heard of working independently." Across the country in Daegu, engineer Nam Dae-ho was leading his own unconventional research project. While most scientists were desperately trying to understand the aliens' matter disintegration weapon, Nam Dae-ho's team focused on the boring stuff. "Forget the death ray," he told his confused colleagues. "Look at how their ship maintains atmosphere. Study their power distribution systems. Figure out how their sensors work." His team spent hours analyzing footage of Tech-9's ship, not looking for weapons, but for basic engineering principles. They discovered that Empire technology, while incredibly advanced, followed predictable patterns. Their ships needed specific fuel types, their life support systems had standard backup protocols, and their sensors operated on detectable frequencies. "It's like studying a really fancy car," explained junior engineer Park Sun-mi. "We don't need to build the engine. We just need to understand where to put the sugar to make it stop working." Perhaps the strangest research was happening at Seoul National University, where linguistics professor Dr. Lim So-young had assembled a team of anthropologists, psychologists, and even a few theater students to analyze everything Tech-9 had said. Publicly, "Listen to his word choices," Dr. Lim So-young explained to her team as they watched UN footage for the 100th time. "He talks about pacification protocols and standard conquest procedures. This isn't just military language, it's bureaucratic language." Student researcher Kim Da-bin raised her hand. "So you're saying they have paperwork for conquering planets?" "Exactly, which means they have procedures, rules, expected outcomes. They're not flexible warriors, they're cosmic accountants with really good weapons." The team's analysis suggested something crucial. The Empire succeeded because they followed proven methods against predictable enemies. But what happened when enemies didn't behave predictably? This insight reached its most dramatic expression when Tech-9 himself visited Dr. Park Yun-kyung, Korea's chief scientific advisor, demanding to know why humans weren't building the massive defense platforms that other species had constructed. "Doctor." Park Yun-kyung looked at the towering alien with 4 arms and eyes like black holes, and smiled calmly. "Because that's exactly what you expect us to do." Tech-9's expression, if it could be called an expression, seemed to shift slightly. "Explain. Every species you've conquered built bigger weapons to fight your bigger weapons. They played your game by your rules. But humans have a saying, The best way to win a rigged game is to change the rules. For the first time since arriving on Earth, Tech-9 felt something he hadn't experienced in 3 centuries of conquest: uncertainty. These humans weren't just refusing to fight conventionally, they were refusing to think conventionally, and that made them more dangerous than any weapon. The Empire fleet appeared in Earth's sky exactly 72 hours after Tech-9's warning, materializing out of what seemed like empty space. 12 massive ships, each one larger than Manhattan, hung motionless above the planet's major cities. They cast shadows that turned day into twilight, their hulls reflecting sunlight like mirrors made of liquid metal. Admiral Vex 7 stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking down at the blue-green world below. In his 400 years of conquest, he had overseen the subjugation of 63 different species. Each conquest followed the same pattern: initial terror, desperate resistance, inevitable surrender, and finally peaceful integration into the Empire. "Sir," reported his communications officer, "we're receiving surrender broadcasts from multiple planetary governments." Vex 7 nodded with satisfaction. "As expected, deploy occupation forces to all major population centers, standard pacification protocols." Down on Earth, the surrender broadcasts were indeed being transmitted from government buildings around the world. President Lee Min-ho stood at a podium in Seoul, reading carefully prepared words about humanity's acceptance of Empire rule and their hope for peaceful coexistence. What Admiral Vex 7 couldn't see was the empty building behind the president. While Lee Min-ho spoke to the cameras, thousands of government officials, military officers, and key personnel were already moving through underground tunnels toward predetermined hiding spots scattered across the country. Private Kang Min-soo crouched behind an overturned car in downtown Seoul, watching the Empire's ground forces march through the streets. The alien soldiers moved in perfect formation, their weapons gleaming with the same impossible technology as Tech-9's device. Next to his standard-issue rifle, Min-soo felt like he was carrying a stick. But Min-soo had been trained by Captain Kim, Hyun-woo's unconventional program. Instead of focusing on the aliens' superior weapons, he studied their behavior. Their patrol routes followed precise geometric patterns. They communicated through their helmets on regular intervals. They stopped to scan areas at predictable times. "Perfect soldiers," Min-soo whispered into his hidden radio, "but that might be their weakness." The first few days of occupation went exactly as Admiral Vex 7 expected. Empire forces established control points in major cities. Human governments cooperated fully. Resistance appeared minimal. The planet was falling into line just like all the others. Then the small problems began. Communication Officer Zek 15 reported the first issue during the morning briefing. "Sir, we're experiencing intermittent signal loss with ground units in the Asian sectors. Nothing major, just brief disruptions lasting a few seconds. Equipment fatigue from the long journey," Admiral Vex 7 dismissed. "Run standard diagnostic procedures." But the diagnostics found nothing wrong. The communication systems were functioning perfectly, except for those random moments when they simply didn't. Navigation problems started on day 4. Transport ships would occasionally find their guidance systems giving incorrect coordinates, sending them to the wrong locations. The errors were small, a few kilometers off target, but increasingly frequent. "Solar interference," suggested the ship's science officer. "This star system has unusual magnetic properties." By day 7, equipment failures were happening across all Empire forces. Weapons would misfire at crucial moments, scanning devices would give false readings, power systems would shut down for exactly 37 seconds before restarting normally. Each incident was minor, each had a plausible technical explanation, but taken together they created a picture that made Admiral Vex 7 deeply uncomfortable. "These can't all be coincidences," he told his senior staff during an emergency meeting. "Run complete system analysis on all equipment." Deep beneath Seoul, in a bunker that had once been a subway maintenance facility, Colonel Cha Won-ho monitored incoming reports with growing satisfaction. His communication center looked like mission control, with dozens of screens showing data streams from resistance cells around the world. Transport convoy Delta 7 successfully redirected to the Han River instead of the ammunition depot. reported his communications officer, Lieutenant Park G1. They're currently trying to figure out why their navigation system guided them. To a fishing spot. Excellent, Cha Won-ho replied. What about the communication disruption in Busan? Shin Yujin's team managed another 12-second blackout during their patrol change. The Empire soldiers had to rely on hand signals and got confused about their positions. The reports continued flowing in. Each small victory was meaningless by itself, but together they painted a picture of an occupying force that was slowly being driven crazy by 1,000 tiny inconveniences. The beauty of the plan was that none of the problems looked like sabotage. Empire equipment was so advanced that minor malfunctions seemed like natural technical issues. The aliens were treating each incident as routine maintenance problems, exactly as the Resistance had hoped. They're not looking for patterns, Cha-Edi. Won-ho explained to his staff. They expect conquered species to fight with weapons and explosions. They're not prepared for an enemy that fights with frustration and confusion. Above ground, Private Kang Min-soo watched Empire soldiers trying to coordinate a patrol after their communication systems had suffered another random malfunction. The perfect alien soldiers were actually arguing with each other, their formation, falling apart as they struggled to maintain contact with their command post. For the first time since the invasion began, Min-soo allowed himself to smile. 3 weeks after the invasion, what Admiral Vex 7 had dismissed as post-conquest adjustment problems revealed itself to be something far more dangerous. The small technical difficulties weren't random at all. They were the coordinated actions of a resistance network, unlike anything the Empire had ever encountered. Han Yuri operated from an internet cafe in Seoul's Hongdae district, surrounded by gaming computers and the constant chatter of online players. To anyone watching, she looked like just another college student spending too much time on her laptop. In reality, she was commanding a digital army of hackers spread across 6 continents. Phoenix Team, Initiate Communication Blackout in Sector 7, she typed into an encrypted chat channel. Dragon Team, redirect those supply convoys to the wrong coordinates again. Make it look like a GPS error. Her network had grown from a handful of teenage hackers to over 3,000 digital specialists worldwide. Each group operated independently, using different methods and targeting different systems. When Empire forces shut down one hacking operation, 5 others were already working on different approaches. The beautiful thing, Yuri explained to her core team during a rare in-person meeting, is that we're not trying to destroy their systems. We're just making them unreliable. It's like changing every 20th traffic light to stay red a few seconds longer. Individually meaningless but collectively maddening. Meanwhile, in the mountains outside Seoul, former Army Sergeant Bae Dong-min was teaching a group of office workers how to disable Empire patrol vehicles using nothing but household cleaning supplies and basic chemistry knowledge. Forget everything you've seen in action movies, Dong-min told his students as they practiced in an abandoned mining facility. We're not trying to blow things up dramatically. We want equipment to fail quietly, mysteriously, in ways that make the Empire question their own technology. His training camps had sprung up in every rural area across Korea, each one teaching different skills to different types of volunteers. Farmers learned to create camouflaged observation posts. Factory workers discovered how to sabotage machinery without leaving obvious traces. Even retired grandmothers were taught techniques for gathering intelligence by simply being friendly to confused alien soldiers. The resistance structure was unlike anything in military history. There was no central command that could be captured, no single leader whose death would end the movement. Each cell of 10 to 50 people operated completely independently, connected to others only through encrypted digital networks that changed daily. When Empire forces raided a resistance base in Busan, destroying an entire cell of 30 fighters, they discovered something disturbing. Within a week, 3 new cells had formed in the same area, each using completely different tactics and targeting different Empire weaknesses. Dr. Song Hae-jin's research team had moved their laboratory into the subway tunnels beneath Seoul, where they worked by LED lights powered by stolen Empire energy cells. But instead of trying to build weapons to match Empire firepower, they focused on something far more clever: Look at this Empire scanner, Dr. Song told her team, holding up a device they'd salvaged from a damaged Empire patrol vehicle. It's designed to detect large concentrations of metal and explosives, traditional weapons and military installations. Her engineer, Kim Tae-woo, smiled as he held up a modified version. But what if we program it to detect something else entirely? Like coffee shops? It sounded ridiculous, but it was brilliant. The modified scanners would send Empire patrols on wild goose chases, leading them to investigate harmless cafes and restaurants, while real resistance activities happened right under their noses. The Eames workshop looked like a mad scientist's laboratory, filled with captured Empire technology that had been completely repurposed. Communication devices became jamming equipment. Navigation systems were turned into decoy generators. Even Empire food processors had been converted into tools for creating fake identification documents. The Empire builds single-purpose tools, explained Dr. Song. Each device does one thing perfectly. But humans have always been good at using things in ways they weren't intended. We turn their own efficiency against them. The Empire's response followed their standard protocols. When they detected resistance activity in an area, they would deploy overwhelming force to crush it completely. This approach had worked perfectly against every other species they'd conquered, but humans didn't fight like other species. When Empire forces surrounded and destroyed a resistance cell in Incheon, they expected to break the local resistance movement. Instead, they discovered that the cell they'd eliminated was just one small part of a network that included 12 other independent groups in the same city. Captain Zek-22, commanding Empire ground forces in the Seoul sector, filed increasingly frustrated reports to Admiral Vec-7. Sir, we eliminated a major resistance base yesterday, but today we're seeing increased activity in the same area. It's as if destroying one group somehow creates more groups. Admiral Vec-7 studied the reports with growing concern. In 6 months of occupation, Empire forces had won every direct confrontation with human resistance fighters. They controlled every major city, every important infrastructure target, every government building, yet somehow they were losing. The countryside belonged entirely to the resistance now. Empire convoys couldn't move without escort. Communication systems failed. Daily, equipment broke down constantly. Worse, human tactics were evolving faster than Empire countermeasures could be developed. They're not fighting a war, Admiral Vec-7 realized during a strategic meeting with his senior officers. They're conducting a massive experiment, with each failure teaching them how to fail better next time. For the first time in Empire history, superior technology and overwhelming firepower weren't enough. They were facing an enemy that treated every defeat as valuable data for the next attempt. Commander Zek-12 stared at the holographic display in his command center, watching red warning indicators spread across the map of Earth like an infection. Each red dot represented an Empire position that had been compromised, abandoned, or simply gone silent in the past week. "How many casualties this month?" he asked his aide, though he dreaded the answer. 47 Empire soldiers confirmed. "Dead, sir. But that's not the real problem." Lieutenant Vex-9 pulled up another display. "We've lost over 300 pieces of equipment. Vehicles, weapons, communication devices, scanners, all captured by human resistance forces." What made it worse was how the humans were using their captured equipment. 3 months ago, Empire technology in human hands had been useless. The aliens assumed their advanced systems would be impossible for primitives to operate. They were wrong. Captain Jung Woo-jin crouched in the back of a stolen Empire transport vehicle, watching his team work with tools that had never been intended for human use. The vehicle itself had been modified so extensively that its original creators would barely recognize it. "Kim, how's the communication array coming along?" he asked his technical specialist. Private Kim Soo-han looked up from a tangle of Empire circuits and human-made components. "Almost finished, sir. We've managed to reverse the signal polarity, so instead of calling for Empire backup, it'll send false all-clear signals to their command center." The modification was typical of human ingenuity. Empire communication devices were designed to be foolproof, with built-in security measures that prevented tampering. But humans had discovered that if you combined Empire circuits with old smartphone components and some creative rewiring, You could make the devices do things their creators never imagined. What about the weapons systems? Young Woo Jin asked. Corporal Lee Ji-hoon held up what had once been an Empire scanner. We can't make it shoot, sir, but we figured out how to make it emit the same frequency as their emergency beacons. When Empire patrols detect this signal, they think one of their own is in trouble and come running into our ambush zones. This constant innovation was driving Empire forces to desperation. Every time they developed a countermeasure for human tactics, the humans would try something completely different. It was like playing chess against an opponent who kept changing the rules mid-game. Scientist Kwon Na-ri had made perhaps the most important discovery of the Resistance. Working in a hidden laboratory beneath a Seoul shopping mall, she'd spent months studying captured Empire equipment, trying to understand why humans could modify it so easily while the Empire seemed incapable of adapting. Look at this, she explained, to her research team, holding up an Empire energy cell next to a human battery. The Empire technology is perfect, more efficient, more powerful, more durable than anything we could build, but it's also completely rigid. Her assistant, graduate student Park Won-young, examined the alien device under a microscope. What do you mean by rigid? Empire equipment is designed to perform specific functions perfectly, with no room for variation. Their communication device can only communicate, their scanner can only scan, their weapon can only destroy. Each device has one purpose and does it flawlessly. Kwon Na-ri picked up a human smartphone and smiled. But look at our technology. This phone can communicate, take pictures, play music, navigate, calculate, store data, and probably 50 other things we haven't thought of yet. It's not perfect at any one task, but it's adaptable. The implications were staggering. Empire technology was like a collection of master craftsmen's tools, each one perfectly designed for a specific job. Human technology was like a Swiss Army knife, not as good at any individual task, but capable of being used in unexpected ways. That's why they can't counter our modifications, Kwon Na-ri realized. When we use their communication device as a jamming tool, their computers can't even comprehend what we're doing. It's like their entire technological philosophy is based on the idea that every device should have exactly one function. This discovery spread through resistance networks like wildfire. Human fighters began combining Empire components with everyday objects in ways that created entirely new capabilities. Empire scanners were connected to car batteries to create powerful signal jammers. Navigation systems were rewired with laptop components to become hacking devices that could infiltrate Empire networks from unexpected angles. The psychological effect on Empire forces was devastating. Soldiers who had trained for centuries using predictable, reliable equipment suddenly found themselves in a world where their own technology was being turned against them in ways they couldn't understand or predict. Empire Patrol Leader Hex 14 filed a report that captured the growing frustration. Human resistance forces attacked our convoy using our own communication equipment to coordinate their assault while simultaneously jamming our ability to call for backup. When we attempted to scan for their positions, our scanners detected what appeared to be Empire emergency beacons, but upon investigation, these signals were coming from modified Empire devices that the humans had somehow programmed to mimic our distress calls. But the most unsettling part wasn't just that humans were adapting Empire technology. They were adapting faster than the Empire could respond. Each resistance victory provided new equipment to modify, new techniques to develop, and new knowledge to share across their global network. Commander Zek-12 realized that the Empire was facing something unprecedented in their conquest history, an enemy that literally became more dangerous every time they encountered it. 1 year after the Empire's ships first darkened Earth's skies, Major Oh Sang-hoon stood on the bridge of what had once been an Empire destroyer. The alien vessel hummed with modified technology that would have made its original designers weep if Empire beings were capable of tears. Status report, Oh Sang-hoon called to his mixed crew of humans and defected Empire soldiers. Sir, we've successfully modified the main weapons array, reported Chief Engineer Park Mi-young, wiping grease from her hands. Instead of their standard disintegration beam, we've created something that can disable Empire ships without destroying them. We capture more than we destroy now. The transformation was remarkable. What had started as a desperate resistance movement had evolved into something the Empire had never encountered. A force that grew stronger by absorbing their enemy's own capabilities. Oh Sang-hoon's unit exemplified this evolution. They had begun the war hiding in subway tunnels with homemade explosives. Now they commanded 3 captured Empire vessels, each one modified with human innovations that made them more versatile than their original designs. The irony, explained Dr. Kim Jae-won, the unit's chief scientist, is that we've made their technology better by making it less perfect. Their ships were designed to do specific things flawlessly. Our modifications make them capable of doing unexpected things adequately. The bridge displayed a tactical map showing Earth's current situation. Red zones marked areas still under Empire control, mostly fortified urban centers where alien forces huddled behind energy shields. Green zones covered everything else, representing territory now controlled by human resistance forces. But the real change wasn't just on Earth. Human forces had begun striking Empire positions on other worlds. Captain Lee Sunmi's voice crackled through the communication system from her position near Mars. Orbital strike on Empire mining facility complete. We've captured their entire supply convoy. Estimated resources, enough rare metals to build 40 more modified ships. These off-world victories were possible because humans had done something the Empire never expected. They had become better at using Empire technology than the Empire itself. The transformation wasn't just technological, it was tactical. Human forces no longer waited for Empire attacks. They hunted Empire positions aggressively, using captured ships to strike at supply lines throughout the solar system. Tech 9 observed this revolution from his position as liaison between human forces and defected Empire soldiers. The former conqueror had initially joined the resistance out of curiosity about human unpredictability. Now he stayed out of fascination with their rapid evolution. Your species learns faster than any I have encountered, he told Major Oh Sang-hoon during a strategy meeting. When my people developed new technology, it took us decades to fully understand its capabilities. Humans master our equipment in weeks and improve it in months. Oh Sang-hoon smiled grimly. Maybe that's because we're not trying to master it. We're just trying to make it work for what we need. This philosophical difference had become the Empire's downfall. Empire technology was created by specialists who spent centuries perfecting single functions. Human modifications came from generalists who combined disparate elements in ways no Empire engineer would consider logical. The resistance now operated like a vast learning network. Each captured piece of Empire equipment was studied, modified, and shared across the global resistance. A breakthrough in Seoul would be implemented by fighters in São Paulo within days. A tactical innovation in Lagos would spread to resistance cells on 6 continents within hours. Empire forces found themselves in an impossible position. They couldn't abandon their fortified positions without being hunted down by human forces, using superior Empire technology. But staying in their bases meant slow starvation, as their supply lines were systematically destroyed. Admiral Vex 7 watched this transformation with growing horror from his flagship orbiting Earth. In 1 year, his supposedly primitive enemies had evolved from throwing rocks to commanding fleets of modified Empire vessels. "Sir," his communications officer reported with barely concealed panic, "human forces have surrounded our position. They're demanding our surrender." "Impossible," Vex 7 replied automatically. "Empire forces do not surrender to primitives." But even as he spoke, he could see the tactical display showing dozens of modified Empire ships surrounding his fleet. Ships that looked familiar, but moved in ways that defied Empire tactical doctrine. Ships operated by humans who had learned to use Empire technology better than its creators. "They're not primitives anymore, sir," his science officer said quietly. Maybe they never were. Admiral Vex 7 realized that the Empire's fundamental assumption that technological superiority guaranteed victory had been shattered by a species that treated every technological limitation as merely a puzzle to solve. His final transmission to Empire headquarters was brief. "They don't fight like a civilization. They fight like a force of nature. technological. Superiority means nothing against an enemy that evolves faster than you can adapt. Within hours, his flagship had been captured intact, adding its capabilities to the growing human fleet. The hunters had become the hunted, and Earth's former victims were now spreading throughout the galaxy, carrying with them a revolutionary idea that any technology, no matter how advanced, could be improved by beings willing to think beyond its original limitations. The message spread across the galaxy faster than the Empire could contain it. On worlds that had been conquered decades ago, beings who had never heard of Earth suddenly learned that a primitive species had done the impossible. They had not just defeated the Empire, but turned the Empire's own technology against them. Doctor. Li Sujin stood on the observation deck of a modified Empire vessel as it approached Kepler 442b, home to the Zephyrian people who had been under Empire rule for 30 years. Her mission was simple: teach other species what humans had learned about fighting technologically superior enemies. Remember, she told her team of human advisors, we're not here to lead their rebellion. We're here to show them that rebellion is possible. The Zephyrians were tall, crystalline beings who communicated through light patterns. When Dr. Li's ship landed in their capital city, thousands gathered to see the representatives of the species that had humbled the mighty Empire. Through translation devices, Dr. Li addressed the crowd. The Empire told you that resistance was futile because their technology was superior. But technology is just tools. The Empire's weakness isn't their machines, it's their thinking. She demonstrated with a simple Empire communication device, showing how humans had modified it to serve multiple functions. The Zephyrians watched in amazement as the device that had once enslaved them was turned into a tool of liberation. Within months, similar scenes played out across dozens of worlds. The Mantari of Proxima Centauri learned to disrupt Empire supply chains, using their natural ability to phase through solid matter. The Corvan collective consciousness discovered they could overwhelm Empire computer systems by coordinating millions of simultaneous attacks. Each species contributed their unique abilities to the growing rebellion, but they all followed the human template: adaptability over perfection, coordination over hierarchy, and persistence over surrender. Ambassador Choi Ji-won worked from a space station that had once been an Empire prison complex, now converted into the headquarters of what would become the Free Worlds Confederation. Her job was to coordinate the rebellion across hundreds of star systems while establishing the principles that would govern the post-Empire galaxy. The old order was based on the idea that the strongest should rule the weakest, she explained, to representatives from 47 different species during the first Confederation Assembly. Our new order is based on the idea that every species has the right to determine its own destiny. The Confederation's founding charter was written in over 300 languages, but its core principle was simple: no species, regardless of technological advancement, had the right to subjugate another. The Empire's response was predictably overwhelming force. They deployed their remaining fleets to crush the rebellion before it could spread further. But they discovered that the rebellion had already evolved beyond their ability to stop. Human tactical innovations had been adapted and improved by dozens of species. The Zephyrians used their light-based communication to coordinate attacks across entire star systems instantly. The Mantari phased Empire weapons into harmless configurations. The Corvan collective mind turned every Empire computer system into a potential weapon against its users. Most importantly, each species had learned the human lesson. Every defeat was valuable data for the next attempt. Commander Park Min-jun, promoted to Admiral of the combined human fleet, watched from the bridge of what had once been Admiral Vex 7's flagship as the last Empire stronghold surrendered. The irony wasn't lost on him. He was accepting the Empire's surrender while standing in a ship that had once symbolized their absolute power. "Admiral," reported Captain Kim De-hai, "we're receiving surrender transmissions from Empire forces across 17 sectors. The rebellion has reached the Empire's core worlds." Park Min-jun activated the galaxy-wide communication network that had once carried Empire propaganda. Now it would carry a different message. "People of the galaxy, he began, his words translated instantly into hundreds of languages. Today marks the end of an empire built on the belief that technological superiority grants the right to dominate others. But we have learned something more powerful than any weapon, that freedom isn't about having the best technology. It's about never accepting defeat as final. Across the galaxy, beings who had lived their entire lives under Empire rule heard those words and understood that everything had changed. The Empire fell not because we built better weapons, but because we refused to fight on their terms. They expected us to match their technology. Instead, we changed the rules of the game itself. On Earth, in the same UN building where Tech 9 had first delivered his warning, Secretary General Park Jimin watched the broadcast with tears in his eyes. Humanity had faced extinction and instead become the catalyst for galactic liberation. The final Empire facility surrendered 6 months later. The age of the hegemony was over, replaced by a new galactic order based not on technological dominance, but on the simple human idea that freedom was worth fighting for, no matter the odds. Earth had proven that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe isn't superior technology or overwhelming firepower. Sometimes it's just the absolute refusal to give up.